Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome back, everyone. It is post-Thanksgiving holiday Monday. So here in rural north central Pennsylvania, the Monday after Thanksgiving is also a holiday. Most of the public schools don't have school today. There are people that have this day off of work, not because of Thanksgiving, but yes, it is the beginning of buck season here in Pennsylvania. So, and also just kind of getting back into the swing after a long holiday weekend, especially here in the United States. It's just a little slow going, of course. But what's interesting is we're going to talk a little bit about Mauna Loa, right? That erupted this morning. Jeez, erupted this morning. It kind of, gave me some more pause and a willingness to look a little bit deeper at the Schumann resonance leading up to this eruption. So for those of you who don't know, in case you don't know by now or when you are watching this, it's on the Big Island in Hawaii. It's in the Volcano National Park, and we're gonna just kind of look at some of the steps leading up to that eruption, which was very early this morning, and certainly explains why I was awake and was not going back to sleep at 4 a.m. Usually I wake up and I can put myself back into a state where I can sleep a little bit longer until about 5 or 5:30, but that wasn't happening today. And then when I did my research about this eruption and just everything that was happening at the time, the one earthquake that registered right at the time of the eruption, wow, that just happened to be right around 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So very interesting experiences. It stormed here last night, which is not unheard of where I live, but to have incredible lightning and really loud thunder at the end of November was a little bit out of the ordinary. Like I said, it's not unheard of, but it was something that was unexpected. So I thought that was interesting. And of course, last night into this morning, there was definitely a lot of elevated geomagnetic unrest. And so all of the electrical aspects were in full force last night into this morning. So we'll go over that. I want to take a look at that stuff. Of course, I have a reading that I want to transmit to you all today. Go over a little bit of astrology for the week. Tomorrow is the 29th. The 30th is Wednesday. We have our first quarter moon in Pisces. So kind of put a pin in that as you're listening or watching today, because when we get into the actual reading itself, there's going to be some strong correlation to our first quarter moon in Pisces. There's a lot of fire that was in the reading last week. And of course, some very specific imagery with the astrology and the Sabian symbols related to some big transits that happened over the weekend, over Thanksgiving weekend, that really connected to something like an eruption and the energy that has been building under the surface for a while now. So but we do have a lot of water, a lot of the feminine in this reading. And of course, as we have the moon moving into Pisces, today it's in Aquarius. It's going to finish its transit of Aquarius. And speaking of Aquarius, Mars in its retrograde is going to be an exact trine to Saturn today in this air trine. And typically a Mars trine Saturn transit is really getting some things achieved to have the staying power in your action and your motivation to continue on with a large project, to bring something to achievement or to reach a goal and to have the energy to do it. Mars is retrograde, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and the fact that the moon is pretty much going to be in a direct conjunction with Saturn as that trine is exacting. So what it really takes in order to find one's backbone, one's own scaffolding in terms of the mind, idealist notions of what it means to be an individual voice in a collective and have that be not not anything that we have to give up on necessarily, but also there is quite a bit of astrology right now that seems to lend itself to, really being very sensitive to what is already playing out and what the experience is at a collective level, either consciously with Aquarius or unconsciously as the moon comes into Pisces, because there does feel too that with all of this fire and a lot of really strong rumblings and a reorientation of everything around us, perhaps there was a Phoenix event for you, as I talked about in the weekly astrology, and even with the astrology for the Sagittarius new moon. Jupiter is direct now, but there's this sense that we're still really kind of unclear. Does it feel like that we're kind of unclear about where we're going, what choices we're making, kind of still stuck, maybe not necessarily stuck, but still in this sense of, am I doing this? Am I putting my energy towards this, this outward motivation that Mars normally represents? The fact that it's in retrograde in the sign of Gemini, we're going to see that, yes, there is this trine to Saturn, and I do feel like that there is a lot of potential to really push forward into something with some real backbone and a sense of crystallization and stabilization with Saturn, but and being very sensitive to that with the moon in Saturn as well, a kind of bearing down emotionally and really receiving the message or the benefit or just some sort of certification of the worth and value of what we've been putting forward, okay? There's definitely some real energy to apply ourselves, but with the retrograde, it really feels like something is off, and I think that that's okay. And not so much that it's off, but accepting that there's still things that haven't really truly manifested or completely catalyzed quite yet. And it's not easy with Mars in its retrograde. And so even transcending, somebody had brought up in our Zoom call last week about Mars retrograde being like transcending the bullshit, and we have to transcend our own bullshit too. And just because we have a Phoenix moment doesn't mean we don't go through the experience in and of itself of being, our identity being burned to the ground, our ego being, destroyed and going up in flames, having to surrender some part of ourself in order to substantiate something can be very painful, right? And so that's something to really be aware of, and also how all of this queen and water energy and even the first quarter moon, because it's always a crisis of some sort of crisis in action. What do I do, right? We had a new moon in Sag with Jupiter direct, with all of the enthusiasm and optimism and a sense of real enterprise, and with Jupiter stationed direct, like a lot of blessing that we were feeling, but also too realizing that there may be a change, there may be a release of old, and to be able to come into something brand new, or another resonance of what we've been doing. And the real wisdom comes from accepting that, as opposed to getting caught up and not getting the things that we think that we want, because we're going to have to really allow ourselves the ability to be sensitive to what is it that we're really here doing, like, and for what benefit. And Sagittarius is so optimistic, and there's so much of the big picture, but it's the big picture. And there's so much Sag energy right now with Mercury and Venus and the Sun, and in making connections to Antares right now. There is a lot of this brimming energy, and it's being released throughout the actual physical landscape in many ways, right through the heart of the planet, right? Hawaii is the heart chakra of the planet. And so when we look at the actual map and the distribution of all the earthquakes over the last week, what is strikingly absent is not a single tremor above the magnitude 4 happening anywhere in Hawaii, but that's the point of massive release of what otherwise has been a lot of seismic activity. That's one thing I definitely noticed, lots of seismic activity. So we're going to look at that. I'll share the reading. We'll get into the astrology. Another notable for this week is that Neptune stations direct. So speaking of the ocean, speaking of Pisces, speaking of the formless non-differentiation, which can be incredibly inspiring and imaginative, or it could lead us into complete just dissolution of who we are in reference to everything else. And Saturn and Mars, if anything today, gives us an opportunity to stand in, firm in our identity amongst whatever collective that we are part of, and really finding our stabilization through that. So I'm going to make sure that the stream here is doing well, and everything seems to be going well so far. So I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you for being here very much. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your presence whenever you're catching this on either on the replay or part of the live chat. I just appreciate everyone being part of and playing their role, right? So let's look at this stuff. Let's look at this volcano, Schumann resonance, geomagnetic unrest. Let's look all of it, because I find it really certainly very intriguing. So 2 people had brought up to me over the weekend that there was a pretty noticeable blank spot in the Schumann resonance in itself. And at first, I'll be honest, at first I didn't find anything entirely compelling about the point-by-point data. But it was notable in terms of, let's see here. It was notable in terms of the way that, there we go. It was notable in terms of the way that it looked like more of a blank spot, right? And the way that I perceived it when I started looking at the actual data points, right? The amplification, the actual frequency, the quality of the Schumann resonance. What it looked like is, if you see this line right here, that's a pretty obvious boundary, and then it gets pretty calm, right? It seems like it's very calm, almost eerily calm at this point. But right before it, there was this really sharp, very synchronized amplification, but it wasn't super loud. And the way that I pictured it when it was brought to my attention and I really looked at it, felt to me, it was like sneezing in a quiet library. Like, the sneeze itself isn't any louder than it ever would be, right? But the fact that you're in this setting where everything is really calm and quiet, and maybe almost too quiet, because it's like a library, or the eye of the storm, or whatever, anything like that. So this really drastic natural expulsion, or this elevated sound all of a sudden seemed really loud. And for me personally, Thursday into Friday was, some pretty funky dark headspace for me. And just being aware of the astrology, all these trines to Chiron, right? The fact that Antares was really part of the conversation over the weekend. My parents both got a visit from the Rona right on Thanksgiving, so that was pretty much canceled for the family. And, I made the dinner over the weekend just to cook the turkey, because it already started thawing. But it was a really mellow Thanksgiving, and a little bit off-putting, just, my parents getting really sick, more sick than they've been, which is pretty much a miracle considering what my dad's been through in the last 2 years with his respiratory health, and having not experienced this, just being more sick than they've been in a really long time, just an extra dosage of it. So it was interesting, and there were all of these things kind of put together definitely lended themselves to a funky headspace for sure. But it was Friday afternoon, evening into Saturday morning where this was this blip, right? This really loud amplification. And so I'll show it to you. It wasn't that loud, actually. I shouldn't say it was loud, because it only got up to 21. When you think about, sometimes the Schumann amplifies well past 100. This was a coordinated and certainly very sharp amplification, and then it went really quiet again. So it felt like, and it's to me that sneeze in the quiet library, something you would never notice if you were, surrounded by a bunch of noise. But since the fact that the Schumann seems, and it has been, it's been very calm. There hasn't been a ton of solar activity. Any flaring hasn't sent any CMEs. We had a really large coronal hole, but my gosh, it just felt like it barely made a blip. Now there was geomagnetic disturbance happening that landed, right? And you can actually see this. Let me get into the planetary, the K index, right? Where it goes up from green. So this is this morning. This is around the time that there was the eruption in Hawaii, and you can see kind of the same thing. This is universal time. So about 9 a.m. is when universal time. So that's about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then just keep going backwards. And so technically it was late last night for Hawaii time. There's clearly this geomagnetic unrest, right? That the ionosphere is disturbed electrically, and it's measured by these graphs here. So there's definitely something happening at 4 a.m. and there was a release of pressure in some ways, or there was some type of ventilation, okay? And when we get into more of the astrology and the symbolic stuff, I'm going to bring up, just kind of remind ourselves about, some of the astrology over the weekend, and specifically the Mercury and Venus conjunction, and the fact that at the moment, basically, of this eruption, as I'm going to show you, the sun's pretty much reaching that same point. So you see here how we had this experience under the surface through and conceptualized it, maybe verbalized it possibly. Venus, we embodied it. There was value to it. We could feel it. It was expressing itself in our relationships possibly. And then the sun, in a sextile to the Aquarius moon, by the way. And then there's this release here, this release of pressure. And you can even see along the graph here that the geomagnetic activity was growing and growing and growing, and then reaching these peaks, the 25th, the 26th, and 27th. But again, the Schumann itself, there's definitely amplifications that are going along each day. They're just not super loud, but they're definitely there. As I showed you, planetary index. So if we get into, I want to show you this. If we get into the earthquake stuff, this is a map of all of the earthquakes over the last 7 days that were 4.5 magnitude or more. And you can see some pretty big ones that are 6 and over, at least 4 of them that are 6 and over. And it's really situated over on this Asian, Australian side of the Ring of Fire in the Pacific. Some pretty big ones. Solomon Islands at 7 magnitude, and there was even one in Turkey, which you're going to find right over here, and Greece as well. There was a big one in Greece and near La Palma, and all on the Pacific side of the South American continent. So a lot. But one thing you don't see is anything in Hawaii at all in terms of large earthquakes. But yet here we are, and as of 9 a.m. or 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here is Mauna Loa, and this is a 4.2 magnitude. And it really was the mountain shaking that hard, because if you actually look at the depth of it, it's a negative 1.2 kilometers, which suggests is that it's being measured off the surface of the planet itself. And so 1 kilometer and beyond is it's measuring the actual quake itself. And a 4.2, that's pretty big for something happening in a active volcano. So that happened just shy of 9 a.m. UTC or Universal Time this morning. And of course, there is a red advisory level, which is a pretty big warning, and that there's definitely lava coming down. So anybody who's familiar with the Hawaiian Islands, is into like volcanic stuff, you probably know more about the geography, the geology, the culture around these islands and these volcanoes more than I do. But this is a pretty significant release of pressure, as I said. because you can see that there has been lots of bigger earthquakes and not a lot of solar activity. But almost the minute we get an elevated ionosphere or an elevated geomagnetic unrest, as soon as that starts happening, it's just like there was a release of pressure right through the heart of the right through the heart of the planet. So, I mean, there's gratitude. At least I'm experiencing gratitude for this release point. It doesn't mean that it doesn't come with all of the things surrounding that, right? Just like when the sun erupts or we erupt in our fifth house, we're either erupting in joy and excitement and enthusiasm, or we're erupting in sorrow and grief, or pain in some way. It's all the same. It's just the quality of that expression coming through our heart space. Just like all of these earthquakes, it's just been a lot of underground seismic activity. And, big part of this too is Uranus in Taurus in its retrograde. There's been a lot of adjustment. And as soon as Mercury and Venus came together, it was almost like it opened the channel. And so you may have felt that in a really dramatic way over the weekend. It may have presented itself in different realms of your life. Maybe it's much more in your emotional, individual realm. Maybe it's something that's happening more spiritually or in your subconscious. It's coming out in your dream state. Whatever it is, this was kind of the stirring of the new moon that we set the intentions for. And again, like I said, Jupiter, stationed direct. There was a lot of blessings of understanding and wisdom and spiritual wisdom, but you still have to have the capacity for the light to go through the prism and understand that it's still light. So, let's move on to, I would like to move on to the reading. So that's the scientific end of things for today. So let's see here. We'll do that. And we will look at today's reading. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. I'll come back. There we go. It's not like I don't do this every Monday, so I don't know why it is. I think it's just because I had an amazing staycation, and yesterday was my birthday. So it's been a pretty nice and very... a lot of reading. I've done a lot of reading, a lot of being very insular and cozy, and things were very quiet around my parts. So the ways that I experienced this alchemical fire in my own life was very much my own, and it was very loud for how internalized it actually was. Because everything around me was just so like chill and quiet, and not a lot of disturbance out from outside, right? In terms of, unless I'm letting it in, right? And that's definitely part of it as well. What type of experiences we're allowing into our informed area here, our informed field. So let's look at today's reading. All right, friends. So we see here that there's a lot of queens in this reading today. The Queen of Scrolls, we got the Queen of Cups, Queen of Roses, which for all intents and purposes is pretty much the same energy. So there's a lot of this energy. The Seagull has come back. I also think it's very interesting that last week we had the chimp in this position and now we have the gorilla. So we still have this primate energy that has to do with blending our intellect and our intuition. The gorilla in particular is an interesting dichotomy in itself, because if you've ever interacted with or just even aware of, the social life of the standard gorilla, they're very strong and intimidating, and they can be very destructive, but they're also very family oriented. And this particular card brings up the necessity to really nurture your relationships again. And so we have the Lovers. We have the Lovers that at its horizontal position, right? About making choices and devotion and really, making a commitment to something, and having that, be in this position says a lot where we still are. And again, I think with Mars and its retrograde, that trine to Saturn today, maybe this is not necessarily a terrible place, but only if we are not patient, I think, with and really want to make decisions very swiftly in a way that we may not have all the data, right? This Eight of Wands reversed, I mean, it's still very swift, but we may not have all of the information. We may be very rash. We may be feeling stuck. We might be slow. Things are moving slowly. There may be obstacles, a situation that doesn't get off the ground. But if we rush too quickly, we end up with random data points that don't coalesce into anything because we are in a rush, or don't have time to really process anything. And this is where Mercury at its detriment in Sagittarius really makes a lot of sense. And so, but there's so much of this feminine energy with all of these queens. And so we're really, people in our lives, or we ourselves, embodying this energy of reception and stillness and nurturing and compassion. And then have Queen of Roses, Queen of Cups, being at the root of things, and also what to kind of expect. It says a lot. And I think this moon in Pisces is going to really draw our own emotional landscape into a very diffused and compassionate place. And that seems to be exactly where we want to be, towards ourselves. We've come so far. And there's some other astrological things that really speak, especially to this bottom tier here, because Pallas Athena, which is exactly conjunct Procyon, exactly opposite Pluto in Capricorn right now, it's going to station retrograde at this degree this week, while Neptune stations direct. So we've gotten so far, and it's very easy to maybe blow it to push ourselves ahead because we're very sensitive to the need to be successful, or to get somewhere, or to quicken the pace. And there's already a lot of there's a lot of friction already, and there's a lot of swiftness, and there's a lot of heat, and there's a lot of action that's part of this week as well. And so being able to not only slow down, but to be in a state of non-differentiation also has to do with action as well. And there's something to really be said for this, in terms of really finding a place where we can merge our spiritual and then the material life around us. And maybe it's just as simple as being a reflective, compassionate, nurturing person to those around you. Maybe it's just fulfilling that avatar in some ways, rather than having to accomplish anything. Of course, we have to meet our needs, and that is something that needs, obviously needs to be dealt with. But we can find ourselves in an effort to, especially with all this Antares energy, to really, confuse in some ways our own drives to succeed or to get somewhere, with this sense of real responsibility and being interested and concerned with those who are also on the pathway, but maybe need some help and encouragement in getting along. So let's look at this one piece at a time here. The Eight of Wands is very swift, and it is actually ruled by Mercury in Sagittarius. And so again, look at this lightning, right? Just like I talked about last night, here to have all of this like really strong lightning and very large thunder, right? A really strong redistribution of charge in the atmosphere is not very characteristic of this time of year, but also knowing that the geomagnetic unrest was strong as well, that the ionosphere was disturbed, and that's where lightning is coming from as well. And then in terms of our own process as well, yeah, look, there's this rainbow again. We see the rainbow through the prism, and Jupiter being the ruler of Sag, and also Pisces, right? Again, there's this sense of blessing that's coming along from this. And you see that each of these 8 wands, so to speak, these lightning bolts, as they are shaped in, this diamond shaped, it has a fixed and, well, certainly has I wouldn't necessarily call it a fixed trajectory, but it is reaching out in all directions, and it's encompassing the entire space and allowing for us to not necessarily process all of this information, but to kind of ride the light beam out to the understanding or the wisdom. But it's going in all directions, right? It's coming from the center point, just like the light going through the prism, and then is spreading out. And Jupiter, that's what Jupiter loves to do, just like spread out infinitely, right? Into this space. But in this this reversal position, I mean, it really speaks to the detriment of Mercury when we either waste too much time disputing all of the information and get caught up in that, feedback loop of Mars retrograde. And in fact, these two, Mercury and Mars, will be in an opposition this week. But we also can find a lot of rash behavior, some thoughtlessness in our communication. We may be feeling jealous or envious, and again, try to rush into things, push through obstacles in a way that is just abating our frustration. And I would say with Mercury and Venus in a trine to Chiron over the weekend, this was very much aggravated and really did push, maybe pushed some immature type of activity or explosions or eruptions as an expression of really this very deep inner wound of self and just the right to be. But if we rush too quickly, we're going to end up with a bunch of random shit that doesn't coalesce together. Or in the case of Chiron, and especially where it is, we may end up with a bunch of fragments that have exploded all over the place, and we can't really put them back together. All we can do is move forward. So, it might be dramatic. It might be something considerably less dramatic, more in the realm of the unseen or more in the realm of your interpersonal life. Wherever you find this, a lot of this Sag energy, I think, is going to point the direction here. What area of life? There's this little bug that just keeps hovering around. Anyway. And we see here the lovers in this horizontal position. So this is the Gemini card, right? The idea of devotion, of the two sides coming together in communion in some way. All of the imagery in this card has to do with these opposing bipolar forces, making a choice, making a commitment, devoting to some sort of course of action. And it's sanctioned, right? You have this very large figure presiding, and you have the cherub, right? That's a big part of Sagittarius energy. Actually, it's actually exactly the degree that the sun was in a sextile to the moon at the time of the volcanic eruption. It has to do with like the stirring of love, like Cupid knocking on the door here. And so, but there's something off about it, or we may be rushing too quick, or we're uncomfortable with how quickly it's moving. We want to process the information, and now we have analysis paralysis right here at the heart of things, potentially. So when you have the combination of contrast, devotion, trust, optimism, these are all the Lovers cards upright. So when it's reversed, you give up on yourself, you're refusing to make a decision, you have an inability to commit. So find yourself kind of in the middle of this, and this is probably where most of us are like, do I? Do I need to change what I'm doing? Do I need to not necessarily give up on myself, but everything that I'm kind of putting this energy into, is it actually is it going to fulfill my heart's desire, right? And again, we may be uncomfortable with the swiftness of energy that is just, expanded and is like reaching out in all directions. Or we may find ourselves kind of caught in the details still and just like, trying to convince ourselves of something. And that was, I think, a big part of where Lilith was in early Cancer last week. It was just the idea of, arguing, the cat arguing with the mouse, like the way that we continue to justify. And now Lilith has come back into yeah, Lilith has come back into Gemini, the late stages of Gemini. So it's conjunct Polaris and conjunct Betelgeuse, which means it's in Orion territory. So there may be something yet here with the Orion nature that allows us to not detach ourselves emotionally, but be able to, again, use our intuition and our emotional landscape. We're going to need to, right? Moon's going to come into Pisces. We got all of this feminine Queen of Cups energy in this reading, the seagull, right? The bird that hovers above the ocean of our own unconscious. But we also are being challenged to find the space in the middle, right? The two worlds, or the two of scrolls. When it's reversed, I mean, we're not really nearly as challenged by what seems like a very dichotomous perspective of material versus spiritual. We're starting to really put it together. But again, the Lover's card here, I think we may find ourselves, just kind of like, whoa, what is happening? And that's going to really play itself out, I think, with the first quarter moon. It will give us our first true crisis since the new moon itself, but it's already been building, and this release of energy from the heart chakra of the planet is very indicative, I'm sure, of much of these experiences going on in our own lives in some way. So and it's not bad that it's like this, right? It's just, with Mars in its retrograde, it's not exactly easy to act on or pioneer into new directions, or even have this, this action hero Superman dynamic behind us that's like, yes, I am devoted to this process. Let's go for it. There's still something holding us back. And maybe we don't have, we're not ready to put it all together yet. Yet there is energy that is really getting just dispersed everywhere in many ways. So the Queen of Roses. Now, again, court cards usually indicate that they're actual people being represented. So it's either part of us, someone in our personal life, someone out there in the macro that's stepping into a role that represents this. And this is a person who is loving, supportive, dedicated, nurturing, compassionate. Maybe there's a person that helped with a resolution. Maybe this is you, nurturing your dreams and visions. This is at the root here. And I think it's important to recognize or to consider that even if things have not gone the way that we want them to, or we need some extra support, that we continue to find at the root of our stability, our connection, our core sense of who we are, that we still give the object of our desire, right? Whatever it is, we still give loving connection to it. We nurture our dreams and visions, right? We can't force them into anything. We have to nurture them so they grow. And so I think this is important to consider at the root of things, of course, right now, and that it could be a part of us. And I would say that it is, right? And so it may be expressed. You may project this out into a person in your life that tends to show up and actually be very helpful, maybe valuing you or what you are doing or bringing to the world in a way that you need to have modeled, right? Or somebody that steps in and values you and allows you to value yourself, to see yourself in the same way that this individual is looking on at the roses, okay? So, but this is at the root, right? This is where our core stabilization and power can really be drawn from, is this perspective. And maybe we just need to embody this a little bit more in our lives in general if we want other people to value what we're doing. So the Two of Scrolls usually is this, like I said, this dichotomy or bipolar experience of the spiritual aspect versus our material lifestyle and what we need to do. And when it's reversed, this is a moment of real release. Not that we're released from responsibility, but the material world is no longer the driving force necessarily. And we're finding ourselves really starting to see opportunities to put our convictions, to act on them, and discover a greater sense of truth about who we are. And so we know what steps maybe to take to integrate. Maybe we're really focused on that. And I think that's very interesting with this Lover's card being in its horizontal position, which suggests to me that our minds are really invested into finding this midpoint, right? To actually integrate rather than to live in these two separate places. It's just in our hearts, I think, that we're really maybe struggling with what that actually entails, or not comfortable with the dispersion of energy that happened over the weekend, or maybe we don't have all of the pieces yet to allow our hearts to really commit to whatever it is, but we're still focused on this drive here. And what we're going to see is then listening is going to be a big part of how we manage ourselves in this situation. And if you're having relationship issues, whatever relationship it is, the listening compassionately to whoever you are having this friction with, even if it's yourself, is seems to be one of the best ways that we can move through this time. Because again, it's one thing to intellectualize your Phoenix moment. It's another to live through, the volcano erupting and all of the damage that it causes. So that's the two worlds. Now here's our second queen of emotions, and this time the Queen of Cups. You can barely see that there is a person here because the Queen of Cups is incredibly reflective. This is the Gemini to Cancer energy. And Black Moon Lilith, the lunar apogee, the oscillating lunar apogee, or the true Lilith, if you want to call it that. And that doesn't mean true as in like it's not false. It means true in terms of the way that you balance something, right? And so the oscillating or true Lilith is just always in a perpetual state of balance, really. Not that it's the other Lilith is false. The other mean Lilith is the average of its oscillation. So, and everybody, has their own way of reading it. Anyway, that's an aside. You can see that this is a reflection, and that Gemini to Cancer, this is also where the oscillating lunar apogee, or Black Moon Lilith, is currently in this Gemini to Cancer range right now in its retrograde. It's going to station direct and go back into Cancer during this week. So there is an emotional depth here, kindness, sensitivity, imagination. You can see like the moon coming into Pisces. At this point, there's emotional depth, there's introspection, there's empathy, there's intuition, and specifically that all of the answers you're seeking are within you, right? To seek your own inner oracle, and not be influenced by judgment or purpose. Ooh, that's a big one. And boy, Sagittarius energy coming, there's a lot of purpose when you have Sagittarius energy behind anything. And so this is really there again, we're going to have this quarter moon in Pisces, right? The moon in Pisces is pretty Queen of Cups, if you ask me. Completely diffused, no boundaries between ourselves emotionally, right? There's no demarcation of the river's delta into the ocean. It's all still water, and it's just a progression into the full collective unconscious. And perhaps that's where we're going to find our answers if we're confused, or if we are looking for some sort of sign in order to commit to some specific thing. It's again, the queen is representing that a part of us, an actual representation of a person in our life, or who we can become, or someone that is going to show up as a projection of this and how we maybe need it in our life, or need someone to give us this kindness, this sensitivity, this emotional depth, and be a pure manifestation of the soul of water. So this is pretty distinct difference with all of the Sagittarius fire energy. And it's going to start, I think, when the moon comes into Pisces in the next day or so. So the moon is still in Aquarius. We're going to look at exactly where the moon was in relation to the sun when the volcano in Hawaii erupted, because it's pretty significant. So, but let's look at some of this guidance here. Number one, here is the Seven of Keys, the ascent. Now, this is about getting to the top of the mountain, pretty obviously, right? Great effort and determination that leads to success. There may be risks involved, of course, just like this mountain climber. There's risks involved. There's a need to train. There's a need to have the right equipment. There's a need to put one foot in front of the other and put hard work in, and it keeps our efforts strong. And so, there's a suggestion here that while there is this emotional healing going on, of course, because we have the seagull again, part of our realm, and about cleansing the emotional and psychic scars to really realize how far we've come, and we've actually put so much effort, and we have taken the risks. And this is a big part, I think, too, where Saturn in Aquarius is, that there is some type of recognition or something that can be presented when it comes to, all of this work that we've put into either our own process, into a project, into a relationship, into our own growth and evolution, into something substantial that we've wanted to achieve and get to. And we've gotten really far. And in fact, it really should be motivating that we've made it to the top, or that we're working for this. The thing is that this is exactly where Pluto is in Capricorn, right? The pilgrims going up to the top of the mountain of the shrine. And so there is right, and on the one hand, there's incredible power to be released here, and yet there is also a lot of the Pluto themes of destruction, of death, of the need to go into the shadow realms in order to come out brand new, right? And so Pluto is definitely having an impact here, but if anything, it just shows, where's our perseverance really coming from? And again, it takes a lot of courage to go into one's own emotional and psychic scars, to really give them some voice and recognize them and nurture oneself while that's happening, because I feel like this is where we're going to get the most success. And this, I think, when the moon was in conjunction with Pluto over the weekend in Capricorn, that may have brought those things out. And in fact, this wasn't that long ago. It was just yesterday that this was happening. And so, things that we don't realize are going on easily come out with a moon conjunct Pluto transit. Things that are often repressed and deep down that we push into the corner has an outlet, just like, maybe a volcano erupting in some ways. That's interesting. So we're still doing this healing work, but we've made it really far. And I think that there is a need to nurture ourselves and to be kind to ourselves or to others. That's the other thing too. We're all on our own trajectory here, and we're all in different places. And it's each of these experiences that we're having is going to be unique to our situation in terms of how we move forward. But there's something to be said for being a reflector, and using and not using our relationships, but identifying again that they are really the mirror for our own soul's evolution, and often are a projection of what is out of balance within ourselves. And so when we do listen, actually, speaking of the gorilla, when we do listen and take the time to listen to those that we love and nurture those relationships, be nurturing, we can actually, surprisingly, get a lot of deep wisdom, right? The Queen of Scrolls is really, guiding us through the entryway into our own Akashic record. And there's a deepening understanding, a readiness to learn, a time for personal growth, right? And bringing and speaking our ideas into reality. But I think that there's a big component of the listening, either to the people in your relationships, into the earth itself, right? To your own inner oracle, your own intuition, whatever it is, there is something deeply to be said here about listening as part of the nurturing, either of yourself, your relationships, your relationship to your work, to your career, your family, whatever it is. It's about listening, and listening compassionately, like actually listening because you want to nurture the relationship and understand the other aspects that are part of it. So, and this is opening a realm that can't really be accessed through necessarily fully the conscious mind. And that's what the Queen of Scrolls really seems to represent, is that it is intuitive and it's wisdom, but it's intuitive wisdom. It's an inner oracle. It's not something that can just be utilized through the means of Mercury, for instance, because Mercury is at detriment. Okay, Mercury is at detriment. It's going to be opposite Mars, that's in Gemini. So this dichotomy of knowledge and wisdom, or what we know and what we understand, depending on where it is in our chart, is not exactly going to be the best place to rely in terms of what do we do. What do we do is going to be our first quarter moon in Pisces, and it's really asking of us right now to get into that mode of really listening, to feeling, and to understand the language of our own feelings. And when those borders and those boundaries are diffused, there's so much effort about putting up boundaries and boundaries and boundaries. But if they're malleable and mutable like Pisces is, and with the moon involved, the Queen of Cups, she's not any less herself. Yes, she's very influenced from the outside, being the water of the water, absolutely. But there may be a need to play this role for ourselves and for other people. And there's considerable healing that I think is still available to us, and some insight we're just not going to get if we keep trying to utilize the realm of the mind. Even higher mind, right? And with a lot of Sag in the chart, it can be very difficult. So that's the transmission of today's reading, my friends. I just want to share the chart with you and show you exactly what was happening at the moment of the the volcanic eruption. Hi, Megan. I thank you for being here. I really appreciate you very, very much. So much. I'm just going off on my own tangent here, as I usually do, but I really appreciate people being here. I do see people are watching, and I'm excited. Let me bring up the chart here. Yesterday was my birthday, by the way, and I know some of you, thank you for your birthday wishes. I really do appreciate it very much. It was chill, it was mellow, it was exactly what I needed it to be. I got a standing desk, which is really a game changer in so many ways for those of you who work at a desk a lot, which is not a thing I've done for much of my life. Having an adjustable standing desk makes a huge difference. It really does. So this is 4 a.m. Eastern time, my friends, which is about the time of the volcanic eruption Mauna Loa. And if you could see here, the sun and the moon were exactly in a sextile, okay? So we know that this is a 60-degree angle in astrology. The 6 denotes, something of a transformation, an inner alchemical process. Something, in a sextile in particular, is something that provides a harmonious connection, but it's something that we have to act on, something that requires some sort of investment of ourselves or some way of acting on this potential. And 6 to 7 degrees of Sagittarius, as I talked about earlier, this was, Cupid stirring in the human heart, right? The human heart. Isn't that what I just said about Hawaii? It's the heart of the planet. And if you remember, Mercury and Venus were in a conjunction at 7 to 8 degrees of Sagittarius over the weekend. And this has to do with the alchemical fires that purify, but also are released because they're under the surface, and it's not until, and they have been under the surface. That's the thing. You look at all these earthquakes, all this seismic activity that's been happening for at least the past week, if not longer. I've been noticing. I'm like, there's a lot of big earthquakes happening. It's only a matter of time before there's going to be a need for a release valve, and I think this had a lot to do, too, with the sun passing over 30 degrees Scorpio into 0 degrees Sag, right? On the 22nd, when we started Sag season, the new moon was right after that. There is a stirring, and that stirring started to become, obvious to the conscious mind when Mercury and Venus, maybe not fully, maybe it was being expressed verbally, maybe it was something about our dissatisfaction or something that we were really satisfied with. Venus is all about our level of satisfaction and our value and worth. So things had been under the surface, definitely moving around, and of course all of those trines over to Chiron, with the 12 to 13 degrees Sagittarius, which is connected to the U.S. natal chart. It's the ascendant of the U.S. natal chart. We are looking at the great attractor. We're looking at connections to Andromeda, right, all in a trine to the Andromeda constellation. So a lot of galactic energy that was during that time in a trine to Chiron. So there was a lot surfacing. There was a lot coming up to the surface to be seen. There was a lot of activity that was the result of something that has been, kind of functioning under the surface for a while now, and it's starting to make its way out. And so at the time of the eruption, you have the sun here, the moon in Aquarius. This degree of Aquarius is speaking of the U.S. natal chart, it's the north node. It's the true north node of the U.S. natal chart, 6 to 7 degrees of Aquarius. And for any of you that have this in your chart or familiar with it, even if you're not, this Sabian symbol is pretty standard in terms of understanding it. It's a child being born out of an egg, right? The egg is is not only is it about birth, but it's about coming out of it's about coming into a brand new kind of mutation. It's coming out of something brand new rather than something that has come from, previous iterations, right? It's a child coming out of an egg, right? There's no ancestral connection. This is something brand new that is making its way to the surface. And there you see this eruption happening pretty much right at this time, this sextile. And so whatever it is, it's being experienced and expressed through these same symbolic representations in the actual physical geological existence, right? To have, all this seismic activity. And this, again, is Uranus as part of this. And so, of course, the moon's going to square Uranus today. Like I said, Saturn and Mars are going to be in an exact trine, and the moon's going to be with Saturn as well. So there's also a sense of not detachment with the moon in Aquarius, but this sense of being able to emotionally individualize oneself from the resonance of the collective, but not to become completely void of any type of emotion. At the same time, the trine over to Mars, which is in Orion territory, definitely just is coming back into conjunction exactly with Rigel, which is the front foot of the Orion constellation. This, we're getting there. There's the ascent up the mountain, and even though Pluto is being Pluto about it, there's still power that's there. And just like there's power coming out of the volcano, just like there's power as a result of the seismic activity, just like there's power released when you see lightning, crossing the sky or striking the ground in some way, but it has its impact on our physical comfort, and it certainly has an impact on how we feel and how we express ourselves based on how we feel with these changes that have been long in the making, right? It's just now that the catalyzing effect is actually making the real change. And that's what Pluto is doing in Capricorn right now, is, putting those energies of alchemy, metamorphosis, transformation that come through the death process, the decay process, and eventually the transformation process, all in these larger structures. And we already know that something is being a new version of humanity. Call it the awakening, call it the Great Reset, whatever you want to call it. It's expressing itself, and we are feeling it along the way as those volcanoes, for instance, are releasing from the heart chakra of the world. So I'd be really curious to see how people are doing after the weekend, what aspects of their life, if they're all, willing to share, are following this type of pattern. Where it goes, again, I really can't tell you. I do know that Neptune is going to station direct on the 3rd of December, which is, so we have our first quarter moon in Pisces, and then after that, we're going to have Neptune station direct. We're going to have Mercury's going to be opposite Mars, and so there is even that swiftness really meeting some sort of like, is this what I really want to be committing to type of energy with Mars retrograde. How do we allow ourselves the space to question, to allow our paradigm to expand without, I think there's a real fear of destroying what has been cohesive up to this point. And that's going to be different for everyone in terms of, well, what parts need to be unraveled? There's that Mars in Gemini. What parts need to be fully destroyed? What parts are what parts are really going to give us a sense of, yes, this is exactly the way yes, now I know this is how I want to weave it. And knowing that no matter what, the wisdom is, and the spiritual transcendence, really, it's all the same at the end of the day. Light is light is light. It's just a matter of having the capacity to differentiate all of the different frequencies of that light, and that comes through the rainbow, right? And the rainbow has a lot of different meanings, right? A covenant, a celestial bridge, right? It's the rainbow bridge of Chiron, right? Again, in Aries, it's not going anywhere. It's still sitting at this 13 degree of Aries in its retrograde. And so there is a lot of frustration. There is a lot of wanting to make really drastic change, and you don't want to destroy everything that's been built. But there are certain things that maybe just need to be put to bed, or need to go through their own catalyzing reaction. And that's very difficult when it's something that you've been involved with for a long time. If it's a relationship or a marriage, some sort of family thing, it's not easy, but it's already well in motion, right? And we talked about this in the reading last week too, didn't we? That the lightning bolt is already struck in a lot of ways. It's now that we're experiencing it out in the macro through these very large activities at a geological level and at a electromagnetic level. It still impacts us, and there is a relationship to everything that is happening at that level. So for those of you who are monthly subscribers, you get your membership through Subscribestar. Thank you. First of all, you have no idea how much that actually allows me to keep doing this. And just know that your astrology report for the week, right, is going to be coming out either today or tomorrow. For those of you who've booked readings, I'm going to be doing, I have a reading sale. Some of you already know about this. I sent it out to the email list. It's on social media, but just in case, the Galactic Oversoul is the draconic chart reading, and is specifically as Starseeds. It gives you, the draconic chart gives you the insight into your unconscious drives, right? The natal chart is more of your personality's individual psychology and the way that your individual personality will express itself, and all of the challenges, all of the assets, the blueprint for your personality in this lifetime. But the draconic chart is looking at the more unconscious drives, the layer of the oversoul. So if you're interested in that, you can book that at catalystenergies.net, and book and pay right through the site. And it's on sale right now. It's normally $111, so it's on $99. And if you're a monthly subscriber, you have a special promo code that gives you 10% off. So for those who have booked, expect your reading this week. Thank you for doing that. And, what I'm about to say, I never, ever do, but I wouldn't be putting it out there if I didn't actually feel like it would make a difference. So for those of you who, like I said, have booked readings, for those of you who are monthly members, I've already extended so much of my gratitude. But I will say that, basically I had to borrow money to pay my mortgage this month. And I have been in a very unique position over the last couple of years to really devote myself to building this business and this practice and this channel very completely organically. I have no sponsorship. I don't have a monetized channel. It is really through my membership. And I was in a very fortunate position from a very tragic and unfortunate event in my life that I was able to use that. Well, those resources are gone now. And as anyone who runs their own business knows, it takes a long time to organically build a small business. And so for those of you who get a lot of value out of these transmissions, and maybe you haven't booked a reading, you're not a paying subscriber, I would really, really appreciate a donation at this point if you feel so called, because this will be one of the first things to go if, in fact, things don't shift around. And that's okay. That's one of the things that I'm leaving myself open to accepting and really listening to my own inner oracle about this work. But that's, I can't continue to do it at this level without my basic living expenses being covered. And that means having to move into a different territory of my works and labors. And so if you do value this, this would be the best time to offer some sort of donation if you're feeling called, so that I don't have to put myself in a negative position to just keep going with this. So I actually am going to put 2 links in the description box as soon as I'm done streaming, to PayPal and Venmo directly to me if you feel so called to make a one-time donation. Of course, if you're interested in being part of the Starseed Fellowship and the Catalyst Classroom, that's $5 a month. You get private Telegram channel, you get access 10% discount on all my services. We do our Catalyst Classroom sessions, and I've been sharing the content of those. And so we're going to have our live Q&A this week. We have the Starseed Fellowship, which is a bi-monthly Zoom call that's very unstructured, and people just get together and we share, and it goes all over the place. And it's really been it's been very helpful for a lot of people. There is a strong community that is forming slowly but surely. And so that's always a way to continue to support this work and what I'm doing. And of course, you can book readings with me. I have a lot of services on my website that fit a number of different budgetary needs. So you can check those out and book right through the website. So I really appreciate everyone so much. I want to continue doing what I'm doing, but I can't actually, do that unless I have the means to support what are very limited, but still very real expenses in my life. So, I'm going to put those links or that access to donations in the description box when I'm done. So thank you so very much. Megan says, happy birthday again. Thank you. Feeling surprisingly optimistic today, light and happy. I definitely feel that way as well. Absolutely. I feel that way as well, considering the fact that I'm like, there's 2 days left in this month and I don't know where things are coming from. I actually am just like, well, here we are. This is it. This is what we signed up for. And I'm open to where my own inner oracle is going to take me. So I really hope that that's where you find yourself, even if you are needing support, you're having some struggles right now in different areas of your life, that we all can really be here for each other. So I appreciate your comments, your contributions, your investment in yourself. Thank you guys so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so much. I think that's all I have for you guys. So I love you. Thanks. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other the best you can. And I'll see you on the next Starseed Ministry. And in the future, for my subscribers, you'll have your weekly astrology report up very, very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.